And with that, I'd like to welcome our first lady, our first presenter. And this is Sam. And Sam is mum to Isabella, who's aged 7 and lives with dystonia. And why I think it's fab that you're opening this meeting is that why it's important that you're opening this meeting is that it's so important to actually listen to the people who help those who live with the condition and actually live with it as a family. So welcome, thank you. I will mention it after. Yeah.
Most of you, if not all of you here today, are experts in this subject, and you suffer firsthand the effects that dystonia has. Unfortunately, I don't have dystonia, and I say unfortunately as I would do anything in this world to trade places with my 7-year-old daughter. My husband and I have 2 children, Isabella, who's age 7, and Matilda, who's 3, and they are like chalk and cheese, but they complement each other beautifully. Isabella's the more serious one, always wanting to please, doesn't want to do anything wrong. Matilda, on the other hand, is cheeky, pushes the boundaries, and always messy and outdoors. Now, I hate to label Isabella, but saying it out loud is an important part of my acceptance of our situation. She is disabled. She has primary generalized dystonia. We started our dystonia journey about 5 years ago when Isabella was 2. But we only really knew about our journey 2 years ago. When Isabella was 2, we noticed that she couldn't walk very far without getting pains in her legs and always wanted to be carried. But we presumed she was just a bit lazy and couldn't be bothered, reassuring ourselves that every other child is the same. Then came the night pains. Isabella would cry and cry, saying that her legs hurt, but due to her age, she couldn't really tell us what the problem was, and it was really frustrating. I automatically used to rub her legs or give her some Cowpole, and it started happening on a regular basis, and we thought something's not right. But we put it down to growing pains and thought a trip to the doctors would sort it all out. Around the same sort of time, Isabella's preschool manager pulled us to one side and said that she'd noticed Isabella was struggling with her balance. She wasn't stable on her feet, especially going down the stairs or coming up the floor. Her running was always deteriorating, and she was falling behind her peers. I told her about the pain and that I'd been trying to get the doctors to help, but so far I hadn't had any luck. And despite me hearing she would grow out of it on the previous 3 doctor's appointments, she persuaded me to go again. So I did, and on the 4th visit, after explaining the situation to yet another doctor, he looked at me blankly and said, "Do you know we're really busy today?" He got Isabella to walk really quickly up and down this small room and said I had nothing to worry about. She'd literally gone about 4 or 5 steps. So I left in tears and felt completely helpless. A few days later, Isabella's preschool manager asked how the doctor's appointment had gone, and I broke down in tears and told her what had happened. To say she was angry was an understatement. So she wrote a letter to the GP and told them what she witnessed as a professional. And on my 5th visit, armed with this letter, they told me they were going to refer Isabella to the hospital. This had taken 2 years. In the meantime, Isabella's walk had deteriorated, the pain in her legs had got worse, and she was becoming really stiff. So, now we went to the hospital and the tests started. I've lost count of the number of blood tests she's had. I can remember how horrendous it is, and still is, watching her crying and struggling with the nurses while they're trying to get her bloods done, and telling her it'll be okay because you're going to get a sticker at the end. She's had a nerve conduction study done, an electromyography. She's had x-rays, MRI scans, including one of her brain as they thought she might have a brain tumour, and more recently she's had a lumbar puncture. As every test was coming back negative, we became more and more frustrated, and it got to the point where you thought, do you know what, I don't really care what it is now, I just want to know so that we can go forward and deal with it. Then dystonia was mentioned, very loosely, but as they still weren't very sure, but they advised us to have a look on the Dystonia Society website. So I did, and I didn't really like what I read. So I looked that once, and that was it. But as with the internet searching, you can't help yourself, and I kept having a look back. We saw another consultant from a different hospital after a while, and they got Isabella walking, hopping, jumping, getting up from the floor, and doing other things, and then they clinically diagnosed her with dystonia. At first, they thought it might have been dopa-responsive dystonia, but they gave her a specific drug for this, and after it worked, it was dismissed. So they changed the medication, but unfortunately, after a little while, the side effects started to creep in. She was getting anxious, she was feeling guilty, she was confused, she was having really emotional thoughts and a fuzzy head. And I remember one day she was so upset, she said to me while she was crying, "What's going on in my head?" So they decided to change the medication again. We were warned that finding the right medication was just a case of trial and error, and still will be and still is. But at this stage, we just thought Isabella was being used as a guinea pig. However, Isabella was put on gabapentin about 18 months ago, and we're still on it now. We have to play around with the dosages, and we had to reduce it at one time because she started to suffer with abdominal pains. They thought it might have been a side effect from the medication, so they decreased it. But very, very quickly, her pain increased. And however hard that was to deal with at the time, at least we knew that the medication was helping with some of her pain. We were doing something, we were going in the right direction. However, during this time that she was on a lower pain, her pain got worse. It was constant, really, and after a few weeks, I don't think she could take it anymore. She looked awful, she was tired, she was pale, she didn't want to do anything, she didn't want to go anywhere, all she wanted to do was be with me. And in the end, she broke down. She said she didn't want to be here anymore. She'd had enough. She told me she wanted to kill herself. After several phone calls to various people, we were advised to increase her medication. And we were able to get some emergency psychology sessions, and very quickly Isabella did start to pick up. Unfortunately, Isabella still suffers with her mental health, and after being on the waiting list for almost a year, we finally just started 2 weeks ago some regular psychology meetings. And I think it's so important for family, friends and professionals to be aware and be educated that dystonia doesn't just affect people physically. In the last 6 to 9 months, Isabella's pains increased once again, and the distance she's been able to walk has deteriorated. It got to the point of last year that we knew we needed to do something more to help. So I filled out countless forms, and I got an appointment with an OT. And to cut a long story short, our house has now been adapted. We have handrails on the stairs inside and out, bath and shower aids, and a chair for the dining room. And these few adjustments have benefited Isabella immensely and given her a bit of independence. We also decided that to live and do things more like a normal family, we needed to get Isabella a wheelchair. And we were pointed in the direction of the British Red Cross, and we were able to rent one for a couple of months. At first, we were a bit worried that Isabella would hate the idea of needing a wheelchair. However, she was over the moon. I think she was just relieved to be able to go and do things and visit places like her friends. She's been able to take part in school trips, and recently she was in a brownie parade. Once we saw the massive benefit having a wheelchair was having, not just for Isabella, but the whole family, we could go to the woods or into town together. We knew we had to apply for one. And as with all these things, application forms and processes have to be followed, and as yet we still haven't heard if we're allowed to get one. Although Isabella was over the moon with the wheelchair, for me it's taking a little longer to get used to. First, there's the practical things. It's really heavy and takes up all the room in the boot. But it's not just that. I never imagined my children needing such things. When you decide to take the next step and have children, I guess most people never really take the time and consider the possibility of having a disabled child, and I never did. However, she's perfect. When my husband and I told Isabella, when we were told that Isabella had dystonia, we didn't really talk about it. We talked about how Isabella was, but we never really addressed the issue. Mentally, I was falling apart. I'd been holding it together since she was 2, and on top of that, I just couldn't accept the fact that this is how life was going to be. It was just a bit too much. One day, Isabella was crying on the way to school. I think we were running late, and she ended up in tears. She had PE that day, and she really didn't want to go. I cried all the way to school, behind my sunglasses. I walked into class, and I saw my friend Alice on the way back, and she asked if everything was all right. I completely lost it. I started crying so much I couldn't breathe, and I was leaning on her. I'm surprised she didn't fall over. And I remember saying, I can't do this anymore. But they do say a good cry is good for you, and it certainly was for me. We were going to beat this. We were going to do anything we could to make this situation as positive as it could. And yes, we would still do have bad days, and many more will come. Isabella will still continue to struggle. but when we can, I was determined to make something good of something bad. So the first thing we did was call the Dystonia Society, and Ross, my husband, had a really good chat with them. He came off the phone and was telling me all the things he'd been told, and on one of these things was that Dystonia Awareness Week, or Day, was just around the corner. So after speaking to Isabella's school, we had held a Wear Something Green Day. I spoke to Anne from the society and I got a fundraising pack and we were away. Isabella spoke in an assembly that week, and although her class knew of her disorder, she spoke and told the whole school. The children raised about £200. It was really, really amazing. We put up some posters around our community informing people of the dystonia and that Isabella had this disorder. I wrote something on Facebook about it, and instead of keeping this our secret, we shared our story, and we felt so supported. It was lovely. So keeping up the positive momentum last year, we held a fundraising sausage sizzle at our house. 250 sausages and 20 puddings later, we had raised about £1,000 for the society, and it was so successful we're doing another one in 2 weeks' time. Ross and his best friend Ian are doing Prudential Ride London this August in 4 weeks' time, and they've been training for about 5 months. And we're finding that these events are keeping us a bit focused and giving us something positive to look forward to. We went to a dystonia support group recently, and although everyone there's a lot older than Isabella, it was really refreshing to be around others and to know what they go through. We are learning that talking and sharing experiences and emotions, however hard it is, can only make anyone feel better. So as scary it is talking here today, it can only have a positive outcome. I have many fears for Isabella's future and how much of a normal life she will lead. However, with the love and support of family, friends, and events like these today, we can try to overcome our fears and learn to be the best supporting parents we can. Thank you for listening to this snippet of our family's experience. And as I keep reminding myself, especially on really bad days, we are all on this confusing, frustrating, emotional dystonia journey together, and we are never alone.
So thank you, Sam, for sharing that, and thank you for being vulnerable, because it's fine to be vulnerable in front of all these guys. And although we're trying to pull back a bit of time, we have got a little bit of time for any questions from the audience at all, and we do have a roving microphone. I think somebody's running to pick it up right now. Do we have any questions at all from anybody, or any comments at all? Yeah.
One of the things I'm concerned about is how the school reacts towards your daughter.
The school have been fantastic, actually. They've been really good. She's in Key Stage 1, so things are a bit more fluid in the classroom. She can get up when she wants to. She finds sitting on the floor quite difficult, so they adapt things for her. The OT have been to the school, and the school are very open to it. We've seen the school nurse. She's been there. School trips are a bit tricky, but the wheelchair has helped that. But my husband did go to the school with them for a trip recently, and although there were some things put in place, Isabella was left a little bit at the back with my husband. So I think there's still things to learn, but I think Isabella's probably the first child like this that they've had in the school. We're a really local, rural school, so I think to them it's quite a big deal. But in terms of the support of the school, it couldn't be better. We had a sports day recently, and it's something that she really struggles with. And she didn't really want to take part, but she did. And everybody had got to the end, and she had probably not long got off the starting block, bless her. And everybody there cheered her for the whole amount of time that it took for her to get there. I was in pieces, as you can imagine, as were all of our teachers. So I think sometimes just the encouragement and the support she has that way far outweighs some of the physical needs that she's got there. But they give her medicine twice a day at school. There's no problem with that. We've got a heat pack there that helps her. They give her a Cowpole. They're on the phone if there's a problem. So So as long as you've got a good and you keep them informed, I've not found a problem as yet.
I think that's really good. One of the things which I've suffered from is my daughter is profoundly hearing impaired. At the junior school and the infant school, absolutely superb support. But I'm afraid once you went to the high school, that's when all the problems came.
I know, I'm quite lucky I've got 4 years for that yet. But that is one of our main fears, is that connection seems to go from what I've heard. We were told by the physio that we've got to look for her high school a year in advance of others, which I had no idea about. So I'm really glad that one comment at the physio gave us that information. And I think that'll be really key, trying to speak to some key people in different schools. And to be honest, if it's not the best school, but it's got the best feeling and the best support from somebody, then I'll take that over the best school, because it'll help her, and that's the main thing.
Time for one more question, and I do apologise, guys, for trying to pull this in. Will you be with us at break as well?
Yeah,
So
I'm
I'm
here all
sure
day.
if you're happy to talk to people, that'll be fab.
all day.
One more question.
This will be really
Yeah.
quick. So I have a child with cerebral palsy and autism, but yes, do engage with schools really early. It helped for us. Go and talk to them and talk to the Senko and spend some time with them if you can.
Yeah.
And do that at least 2 years early. And then you can get some planning in place to make sure everything's ready for when they start. High school is different. It works in a different way, and it was a bit scary to start with. But by working with the school, we managed to find we've worked it out, and it's okay.
Okay.
But it's just different and takes a little while to get used to. But
Yeah, I might come and chat to you later.
No, you're welcome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
No,
Thank
thank
you. Thank you.